Like, it happened. There's evidence, physical evidence of this happening.
You know, I used to love all that new atheist stuff. But...
Me too. But a lot of those guys fell apart. The place that I go to, they read and analyze passages in the Bible. Christianity in particular is the most fascinating to me. It's a historically documented human being. That's where it gets weird. I don't think it's nothing.
No.
I think there's something to it. And you get those people that are unable to answer the question of whether or not you should protect an unborn fetus or whether or not they have human rights. I'm really interested in what these people were trying to say, because I don't think it's nothing. Like, it's a fairy tale. I'm like, I don't know if that's true.
Joe Rogan has completely changed his view of Christianity. I made a list of top 10 fascinating clips from Joe's recent interview with the guys from Triggernometry to show you something incredible that's happening with Joe. And Joe says something in the last clip that you won't want to miss. Let's start with number 10, where Joe not only reveals that he has been going to church, but also that he loves it.
It also gives you like a lot of inner peace. It does. Like, if you don't have that, which I don't, and I've got a friend who's a devout Muslim, and he's going through tough times at the moment. And I say to him, like, how do you get through this? And he's like, bro, I've got my religion, I've got God, and I know everything's going to be okay. He's a great guy. And he goes, I pray 5 times a day. It really helps me.
For educational context, Muslims pray 5 times a day as a religious obligation called Salah, which involves specific prayers at dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and night.
What I'm going through is part of his plan.
Yeah, if you really do believe that, it definitely will help you.
I haven't got there, but I have started going to church every now and again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy it?
I love it. I do.
I do too. It's a bunch of people that are going to try to make their lives better. They're trying to be a better person. The place that I go to, they read and analyze passages in the Bible. I'm really interested in what these people were trying to say, because I don't think it's nothing.
Both of these men say they love going to church, but they still aren't Christians. I'm praying that God brings them the rest of the way. Joe is not only interested in the Bible, but he also thinks Christianity is fascinating.
And Christianity in particular is the most fascinating to me, because there's this one person that everybody agrees existed that somehow or another had the best plan for how human beings should interact with each other and behave, and was the best example of it, and even died in a non-violent way. Like, it didn't even protest, died on the cross, supposedly for our sins. Like, it's a fascinating story.
Even Bart Ehrman, the popular scholar who's doing everything he can to disprove the Bible, has said Jesus existed, and those vocal persons who deny it do so not because they have considered the evidence with the dispassionate eye of the historian, but because they have some other agenda that this denial serves.
What happened? Who was Jesus Christ if it was a human being? What was that? That's wild.
Well, Jordan's idea, as I understand it, is that the point of the story, if you like, is it's about voluntary self-sacrifice. It's about the fact that to have a good society, people have to be willing to sacrifice something of themselves for others. And that's what Jesus is, and that story is supposed to inspire in all of us.
The idea of sacrifice emerges in the story of Cain and Abel, and Cain and Abel both make sacrifices to God in order to stay on his good side, let's say. And what a sacrifice means is that you give up something of value in the present so that you can improve the future.
Just a note, please don't get your Christianity from Jordan Peterson.
Right, but it's a historical human being too, though.
Yeah.
It's a historically documented human being. That's where it gets weird, because there's a universal depiction of what this human being was like that doesn't seem to vary that much between all the people that knew him. That gets weird.
You know, if you go to Jerusalem, you can go to the Garden of Gethsemane.
For reference, here are some pictures of the Garden of Gethsemane.
And for those people who don't know, that's where Jesus was arrested by the Roman soldiers. It still exists. You can go there 2,000 years later.
Wow.
And you just literally walk around this place. You're just like, my God. Like, the connection to those stories, it's right there. And also, I think the lessons that you learn from going to church are incredibly profound.
And that's why we believe the Bible, and not other religious holy books. The Bible has history to back it up. And Joe recognizes that the Bible is not only historical, but it's also, in a sense, necessary.
And if you don't have something to believe in, there's not a thing that you follow that you believe is making you be a better version of yourself, be a better person. If you're just relying on your whims and your, whatever you think is the moral thing to do, then you know what you get? You get those people that are unable to answer the question of whether or not you should protect an unborn fetus or whether or not they have human rights.
Right. Would you agree with that? All members of the human family, no matter what their achievements, no matter what their attributes, all members of the human family are worthy of all provision and protection.
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. That's a problem.
Matt Dillahunty has no idea if all human beings are worthy of protection? Yeah, that's a big problem.
No, they don't. And they just, that's what you get. That's what you get when you have no religion.
Yeah.
If you have religion, you go, wow, that's a good question. That's a very good question.
And it's also as well, when we look at the new atheist movement, and that's something that I really followed, Dawkins and all these kind of people who pointed out the ridiculousness of certain religions, etc., etc.
Just FYI, thought leaders in the new atheism movement include Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett.
And then we don't need religion. I think that's fundamentally inaccurate. I think human beings need religion.
I don't know if you need it, but it definitely can help.
But I think societies need it.
Yeah.
Well, it depends what you mean by quote-unquote need. If the Bible is true, then we do need it to be right with the one true creator God of the universe. I think it's particularly interesting how these men have changed their view of the new atheism movement.
So I just think it's silly to dismiss all these stories as being useless. The deeper you dive into it, the more interesting it gets.
Yeah. Well, last time we had Richard on the show, if you remember, we kind of pushed him on this.
Yeah.
And as far as we could get is he was like, well, maybe it's a story that's useful, but it's still not true. And I'm going, well, if it's useful, maybe we should hang on to it for a little bit.
The comfort that you get from believing a falsehood is like a drug, and it's a perfectly valid argument to say that there's everything to be said for the drug. And there are, of course, real drugs you can take. It doesn't have to be a false belief.
I've got to the stage in my life, Richard, where I can tell a lot of the time if someone is religious because there's a lightness about them. There's almost that kind of existential dread which hangs off atheists.
That's so true, isn't it? Richard Dawkins comes across as unhappy and angry all the time. Also, the good news is the Bible is both useful and true.
Do we want to throw away something that's useful because we're so fixated on literal truth when this is perhaps a metaphor?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of moved on that. I was, I used to love all that new atheist stuff. But...
Me too. But a lot of those guys fell apart. And all those guys get real persnickety. They don't seem very enlightened. They don't seem like they're at peace, which is interesting, because that's the true Christians that I've met.
Those leaders of the new atheism movement used to be like rock stars. But now, nobody seems to really take them seriously anymore. And people are looking to the Bible. And the reason is, as Joe points out here, there's real physical evidence for the Bible.
I think there's a reason why they all have a flood myth. I think there's a reason they all have a very similar story of catastrophic floods and chaos. And then that jives with what geologists are finding and what these people are finding that are exploring the Younger Dryas impact theory, that there was floods, massive, enormous amounts of water that are instantaneously released from melting ice caps all over the world because of comet impacts.
The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a comet strike about 12,900 years ago triggered massive flooding and climate shifts, potentially inspiring widespread flood myths across ancient cultures. Sounds kind of like a story in the Bible.
There's physical evidence of this happening. And I think that's what they're trying to say in these stories. I just think it's so confusing because you're dealing with a time so long ago. We talk about how different people live today on Earth, but way more similar today than we would be reacting or interacting with a society that existed 6,000 years ago.
One physical evidence is the channeled scablands, massive erosion patterns, and sediment deposits, which supports the occurrence of widespread flooding.
Like, what are we even talking about? Like, what is that like? What is the world like then? What is discourse like? Like, what rules are there? What protections do you have against being robbed and stolen from? And how often is war? What is life like back then? It's nuts.
Maybe the earliest humans weren't as different from us today as a lot of scientists would have us believe. And maybe, as Joe points out here, the education system is indoctrinating kids with bad ideas.
And that's why I really worry about the fact that people think political violence is justified.
Not just justified, but celebrated.
Yeah.
That was the creepy part. The creepy part was the celebration, the people that were celebrating. Some lady recently just lost her job because people were driving by. She was doing a No Kings protest, and she started mocking, getting in the neck. And she was a school teacher. Yeah, elementary school teacher.
Hey! You ever heard of Ozempic, you fat ass?
Not all teachers are exactly like her, but when kids are sent off to public schools, you never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah. Crazy people. There's a lot of crazy people out there. And some of the people are, they're correct in worrying about the impact that these people have on their children. You're correct.
Correct.
You have a lot of crazy people that are teaching your kids.
I know so many people now who are homeschooling, and to be honest, it's something I'm thinking about.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, the problem socially is kids need to hang out together.
Yeah.
It's really important.
I worry about that too.
That's why it's good to find a community of like-minded people where your homeschooled kids can hang out with other homeschooled kids. Maybe something like a church.
Yeah, but I think you could probably replace that with sports and good friends. Yeah. And especially if you lived in a community where multiple people were homeschooling.
Yeah.
But then, people get weirded out about homeschooling because they think it's that leads to religious radicals. You don't
have to be religious to homeschool.
People in this country, people connected to religious Christians, like radical Christianity.
I wonder where the line is for them between a regular Christian and a radical Christian. But if Joe doesn't consider Wes Huff to be a radical Christian, then hopefully I am safe too.
I just don't want some 25-year-old with blue hair teaching my son that communism is brilliant.
Exactly.
Can I not have that?
And the weird one is people that have no desire to have children of their own. You know, and they want to indoctrinate people's kids into their way of thinking. It's like a part of why they teach,
It's because they're so...
Sorry, but I just had to find an example of a blue-haired teacher for you.
Think about the teachers who refused to remove their pride flags this past year. The librarians who quietly banned books available through coded systems. The principals who used their school newsletters to affirm students even when it wasn't policy approved. There are resistance happening. That's not compliance, that's courage. That's the spirit of we teach, we fight, we stay.
Yeah, I don't want anyone like that teaching my kids. I care about truth, which Joe talks about in this next clip.
And I said to Konstantin, the great thing about an ideology is it gives you certainty. Mm-hmm. The terrible thing about an ideology is...
It gives you certainty.
That is so true. And it's also the appealing thing about it.
Oh, yeah.
I've always been attracted to the idea that these people, really believe. It's fascinating when I watch, super religious people that are praying 5 times a day, and I'm like, that is amazing. Look how dedicated they are to that thing.
Just a thought, what if what you're certain about actually is true? Then it would just make sense to go all in on obeying the teachings of that true thing.
There's an attractiveness to that. God, I wish I was if I was that dedicated to something, I'd probably be way more stable in my life.
Yeah.
Because you're just locked in and everybody believes, and you see people talking about the religion with utmost certainty. I wish I was that certain.
Yeah.
Wish I was that certain. Those guys are so certain they're willing to die.
There's a reason why Christians tend to be happier and more stable than other people, which is what these men talk about in this next clip.
And I've met some legitimate, very charitable, kind Christians. They're some of the happiest and kindest people I've ever met.
And that's borne out in the statistics as well.
Yeah.
After the death of George Floyd, people without God rioted. But after the death of Charlie Kirk, Christians held prayer vigils. That's because Christians have peace through Christ.
However, I will say this, though, right? And I think this is worth it. The best people I've ever met are Christians, but also some of the worst people I've met.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, there's a real issue in Texas where there's these very wealthy guys that are trying to they succeeded in getting the 10 Commandments put in every public school, but they essentially want Texas to be a theocracy.
I'm not sure exactly who they're talking about here. It would be nice to know, because then we could actually discuss what's going on. But in contrast, one very devout Christian Joe does have a lot of respect for is Wes Huff, who seems to have had a lasting impact on Joe, since Joe keeps bringing up the things that he and Wes talked about during their conversation.
So you're writing things down on animal skins frantically and hiding them in clay jars in Qumran, and I hope somebody finds this someday. And then thousands of years later, someone does. They find these ancient Scrolls and they pull them out, and they're versions of stories from the Bible. What is the oldest version of the Bible or the stories in the Bible? Is it the Dead Sea Scrolls, or are there older versions?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest of the Old Testament. So when they were discovered, so they were discovered in 1946 to 1957. And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts 1,000 years, which was a big deal.
Wes definitely helped Joe see the Bible in a completely different way.
So these people have been telling these same stories for thousands of years. Like, well, okay, what were they trying to say? That's what's interesting to me. I don't think it's nothing.
No.
I think there's something to it, and there's a reason why it resonates with people.
Joe says, I don't think it's nothing. Well, he's right. And I think what's incredible is that he's actually starting to believe a lot of the Bible, even defending it against skeptics.
There's a lot of like atheists and secular people that just like to dismiss Christianity as being foolish. It's just fairy tales. I hear that amongst, self-professed intelligent people. Like it's a fairy tale. I'm like, I don't know if that's true. I think there's more to it. I think it's history, but I think it's a confusing history.
The Bible's history isn't actually that confusing, and as we find more and more archaeological discoveries, we find more and more evidence supporting pretty much all the history in the Bible.
It's a confusing history because it was a long time ago, and it's people telling things in an oral tradition and writing things down in a language that you don't understand, in the context of a culture that you don't understand, and I think there's something to what they're saying. I think there's a reason why they all have a flood myth.
Joe says he doesn't think the Bible is a fairy tale, and that he thinks it's history. He's come such a long way from pretty much hating everything about the Bible.
The whole thing's so stupid. Just stop and think how stupid that is.
Let's pray that God would open Joe's eyes to the full truth of sin and salvation through faith in Jesus Christ, which Wes Huff himself presented to Joe.
And if Jesus is nothing but a moral example, then you can save yourself and you don't actually need a savior. And so I think actually Jesus would have critiqued that because Jesus was very against moralism.
Hey, I'm Mike. If you want to support what I'm doing and help these videos reach more people, would you consider clicking that subscribe button? Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. Here is another one that you might find interesting.